This week is the 4-year anniversary of Joe Douglas becoming the New York Jets general manager. I want to compare and contrast the rosters from then to now. What is going on, guys? Matt O'Leary back with another video. Today I want to get into the New York Jets roster when Joe Douglas first came over and what it looks like now 4 years later. Before we get started, Matt O'Leary NY on socials, and the Just Jets podcast airs every Wednesday. Make sure to check it out, subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure to call in. Okay, so as I mentioned this week, it's been 4 years since Joe Douglas has taken over as the New York Jets general manager, and a lot has changed. Things are vastly different. And someone, LI Jets on Twitter, posted a compare and contrast of the roster from 2019 to when he first came in here to 2023 and how much things have changed. At the time in 2019, the Jets roster was ranked 31st in the NFL by ESPN. In 2023, they are now ranked 8th, so obviously a massive improvement. But I wanted to go through and compare position by position and talk about areas where Joe Douglas can improve and what he's done really well so far. So we'll start with the offensive side of the ball. In 2019, Sam Darnold, starting quarterback, to Aaron Rodgers. That is an obvious upgrade there. How they landed Aaron Rodgers, because they had another failed quarterback, a quarterback that Joe Douglas drafted. So, I mean, that obviously has to be a part of the equation, but obviously a very good pivot to then get aggressive and go for Aaron Rodgers. Darnold going into year 2. We were excited about Sam Darnold going into year 2. I thought he had a pretty solid second season. It wasn't bad. It wasn't abysmal. It wasn't amazing. I thought he was okay. So it showed some flashes, but unfortunately the writing was on the wall with Adam Gase. Le'Veon Bell to Breece Hall. Obviously Breece Hall, big upgrade over what Le'Veon Bell was in 2019. Bilal Powell versus Bam Knight. Oh, Bilal. Gotta love me some Bilal Powell. He was pretty much at the end of the road there. So comparable to, I would say, what Bam Knight is. Bam's listed as RB2. You could put Michael Carter. You could put Izzy Abanikanda. Moral of the story, as much as I love Bilal, the 2023 version of the Jets running back room is much deeper than the 2019 version of the Jets running back room. Wide receiver, Robbie Anderson, Quincy Enunwa, Jamison Crowder, Braxton Berrios. Jamison Crowder was pretty solid in the slot for the Jets, and I'm a huge Robbie Anderson and Quincy Enunwa fan. Unfortunately, Enunwa got hurt, and that was pretty much the end of his career. But let's be honest here, the 2023 wide receiver room is much better. Garrett Wilson, a legit number 1 wide receiver. Robbie was probably never a true number 1 receiver. At his best, a really good number 2, a deep threat. Again, I really like Robbie Anderson and his time with the New York Jets, but Lazard, Davis, Hardman is a much better wide receiver room than Anderson, Enunwa, Crowder, Berrios. It's not even a contest at tight end. Tyler Conklin and CJ Uzomah versus Ryan Griffin and Daniel Brown. It was almost hilarious how bad the Jets tight end room was. And it took Joe Douglas a while to fix that. It wasn't much better in 2020. 2021, it wasn't great either. It was really 2022 when the tight end room was finally fixed. Offensive line, let's talk about it. Left tackle, Calvin Beachum. Left guard, Alex Lewis. Jonathan Harrison at center. Brian Winters, Brandon Shell. A really, really bad offensive line at that point. Now the offensive line, Dwayne Brown, Laken Tomlinson, Joe Tippmann, AVT, Mekhi Becton. The offensive line is obviously improved, but there are still some question marks at the offensive line. Laken Tomlinson was brought in and paid a lot of money, and he really was frankly bad in 2022. So you're hoping for a bounce back year, but he really struggled. Dwayne Brown is almost 40 years old and is coming off an injury. So that is a major question mark there. Joe Tippmann's a rookie at center. That is a major question mark. I think he's going to be good, and I think he gets to, the starting role over Connor McGovern, but that is still yet to be seen, just the level of how well he is going to play in his rookie season in the NFL. Again, I want to make it clear, I think he's going to be pretty solid his first year. AVT's a stud. That's the biggest win, the biggest upgrade. Mekhi Becton, love his potential, but again, that is a question mark for a guy that hasn't played in 2 years. So I think for me, one of my biggest criticisms of Joe Douglas is the offensive line still being in the state of where it is. Has it improved? Yes, but there's been some hiccups along the way. For instance, Mekhi Becton, unfortunately, hasn't been able to stay healthy. Connor McGovern, who they brought in, was okay. And now they drafted Joe Tippmann. So you'll see, I mean, it's still yet to be seen how well he is going to be. Like in Tomlinson, a big swing at free agent, hasn't panned out yet. We'll see if he bounces back. And you have Dwayne Brown right now as your starting left tackle. So it's an improved offensive line for sure. Has the potential to be good, but a lot of it is potential based, and that's still being a question mark at this time in his tenure is slightly disappointing. Is some of it out of his control? Yes, but that is still an area where you would like him to improve. On the defensive side of the ball, you had defensive line Leonard Williams, Quinnen Williams, Steve McClendon, and Henry Anderson. Switch that out with Carl Lawson, Quinnen Williams, Quentin Jefferson, and JFM. And on top of that, the depth that this year's unit has, my goodness gracious. Will McDonald, Jermaine Johnson, Michael Clemens, Al Woods. You go right down the line. There is Bryce Huff is not included. The Jets did not have an edge presence. Leonard Williams ended up moving on from Henry Anderson, had a nice 2018 season, absolutely stunk in 2019. This is the best edge unit that they've had in a while. They have speed off the edge finally. So this defensive line is vastly improved and has significantly more depth than what they did in 2019. Linebacker room, CJ Mosley, Jordan Jenkins is listed as a linebacker. He was kind of an edge. Neville Hewitt versus CJ Mosley, Quincy Williams, Jamie Sherwood. Linebacker room is still on the weaker side. That is still a little bit of a position of weakness. Quincy Williams is, probably the best of the bunch. Jordan Jenkins isn't really a true linebacker. He was a 3-4 outside linebacker. So not really necessarily fair to put him in that spot. But Quincy is better than Neville Hewitt, and Jamie Sherwood is still yet to be seen. But Jamie Sherwood honestly might be better than what Neville Hewitt is. Corner is not even remotely close. Tremaine Johnson, Darryl Roberts, and Brian Poole versus Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, and Michael Carter. That is about as vastly different as you could possibly be. They spent big money to bring in Tremaine Johnson. He was one of the worst free agent signings in NFL history. He was flat out terrible. Darryl Roberts had some moments, but not nearly consistent enough. And Brian Poole was an okay slot corner. He wasn't amazing. He wasn't terrible. He was pretty solid. And Michael Carter is, I would say, a better. But Sauce and DJ Reed are two of Joe Douglas's best draft picks and free agent signings. Joe Douglas, one of his bigger criticisms that people have is his free agency periods, and I think some of that is fair. But DJ Reed was a home run free agent signing, by far his best free agent signing. To me, it's not remotely close. And Sauce Gardner is everything you wanted him to be and even more as the 4th overall pick. I guess you could definitely say a downgrade at safety with going from Jamal Adams and Marcus May to Jordan Whitehead and Chuck Clark. But what you were able to do with the Jamal Adams trade and letting Marcus May walk, I mean, they franchised. They got a lot out of Marcus May. So I was fine with how they handled that. Marcus May was a solid Jet. Jamal Adams didn't want to be here, and you turned him into AVT and Garrett Wilson. I think that is absolutely a home run. Jordan Whitehead, you're hoping bounces back, but that doesn't look great as a free agent signing as of yet. Chuck Clark, I thought, was a good trade, especially for what you gave up. You gave up a 7th-round pick to get a starting safety for a guy who wasn't happy with where he was in Baltimore. So obviously there's been a lot of improvement from 2019 to 2023. Now for me, really, it's just all about getting the wins on the table. That's the biggest thing for me. Is it's time to put wins up. They've in 2019 they were 7-9, then 2-14, and then 4-13, and then 7-10. It's time now to win games. You have to be a playoff team. I'm not saying it's Super Bowl or bust. I don't think that is necessarily fair with how good the AFC is. But I'm happy with the progress of the roster, and I think Joe Douglas has done more good than bad. I think some people are way too high on Joe Douglas and think he's a top 5 GM in the sport. There's been mistakes along the way. Whether you want to talk about free agency ads, draft classes, for instance, 2020, 2021 looks a little bit weaker now after you move on from Elijah Moore. You essentially move on from Zach Wilson and getting a replacement. AVT is a good find there, but not really getting a whole lot else from that draft class in 2020, at least you could say. But overall, he's been solid. Going from 31 to 8 in the ranking is really, really good. It's just time to put wins out there. And I don't think it's unfair to say that it's time to add wins. Like, there's certain points in a rebuild where you're not going to be very good, which was the first few years. They brought in a new quarterback. They brought in a new coach. The quarterback didn't work out. So they pivoted and they were able to add a veteran in Aaron Rodgers, and they have legitimate expectations. They need to reach those expectations this year. You cannot afford to have a disappointing season in 2023 with how good this roster is, and that's okay. You're allowed to put expectations in. You're allowed to put pressure on these guys. That's not me saying that I think and or want Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas to get fired. That's not the case. I just think it's time for them to win. That's what I'm saying here. I believe they can. I believe that they will. I picked them to win 11 games this year. I think they're an 11 or 12 win team this year. They just have to show it. That's all. So just wanted to go through that and talk about how much this roster's changed over the last little bit. Comment below your thoughts. Once again, I'm Matt O'Leary. I'll catch you next time.